Well, I think immigration for our country is what we're founded on. Most all of us are immigrants ourselves, just a question of what generation. For tech policy, you've seen other countries, whether it's the Asian countries like India or France in Europe, realize that you want to attract the best and brightest from all over the world to your shores and to work in your areas of opportunities. Probably over 50% of the startups in the U.S. in high tech are first or second generation immigrants from other countries. And so I would be surprised if this isn't front and center, both on a immigration basis for the country, but especially for high tech talent. Startups will determine our future, Carl, as a country. And I'd bet you that 2021 will be viewed as literally the resilience of the startup community in the U.S.
Interesting. What do you mean when you talk about a great reset? What are you sort of visualizing for technology in this country?
Well, the first thing that I'm visualizing is every company, every government will become a digital company. So we used to talk about technology on one side and the company's core business on the other. They're now combined inextricably. And so the ability to think about what does this mean to the future of our country, not just for tech policy, but how it creates jobs, how it creates a startup economy has to be very carefully intertwined. We went through a period there where the startups were actually decreasing in this country year over year. The big ones got all the publicity, the Ubers of the world, et cetera, that later went public. But it was the small startups that are core to job creation in the country. We're starting to see that revive. Out of my 20 startups I have, all of them have turned the corner during the last summer and starting to grow, starting to acquire other companies, et cetera. So I think you're going to see the startups be the job creation for this country's future. And I hope in all regulation, whether it literally goes back to the regulation that you talked about earlier today, people take into consideration what does it mean to startups, not just to big companies.
Good morning, John. Good to see you. I want to talk about China because President Biden is in a really interesting position there with the amount of pressure and the amount of, seeming arbitrariness with which President Trump approached China. What would you advise the Biden administration to do when it comes to tariffs, when it comes to access to technology, when it comes to even pressure on social issues in China?
Well, I think our country's values are more important now than ever. As you know, I've been in China for 35 years, did the first high-tech joint venture with Wang Laboratories in China. And it was a win-win mentality with tough negotiations. The last decade has developed into win-lose, John. And China was not playing on a level playing field. They're expecting to be able to access our markets pretty much in an open environment. And yet we were dramatically restricted in their environments with huge problems on intellectual property protection. Bottom line, I think that President Biden will maintain many of the similar concepts, but do it much gentler. Rule 101 interfacing to China, in my opinion, is constructive dialogue, but do it in a statesman-like role, not so much in a confrontational role. I think we're going to continue to be challengers for the foreseeable future. However, it's in both countries' interest to work closely together. But I do not see a dramatic warming in the near term.
Strategically, how does a Biden administration do that when the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP ship has sailed? China has set up its own multilateral trade agreements in the meantime, and the U.S. has been in this position of doing one-on-one, kind of one-off engagements. Do you step back and try to do something multilateral again, even though that takes longer, and maintain the tariff pressure that's in place, or something else?
I would continue to keep the tariff pressure in place. You've got to have a level playing field. It is not. It's a win-lose mentality. And there's a clear goal in China to how to execute the U.S., including perhaps going beyond what most people would consider the lines of give and take. We need new rules of the road. I would build relationships like with India and Prime Minister Modi. He's been extremely open to that. And with the rest of the players in the Asia-Pacific arena in particular. Most countries in Asia have a concern about China. I think the U.S. needs to get back to what it does best, which is to be the best ally we can be there and to offer alternatives on it.
Right. When it comes to what China does best, 5G has been a hot topic, John, and I wonder if you think that pressure in a Biden administration eases or lets up at all on the likes of Huawei and ZTE. What might that mean for 5G and the chip industry at large?
Well, first, there are core competencies that we have to have as a country if we're going to lead. From earlier comments, technology, digitization, companies, defense will all come together. If this country doesn't lead in certain areas of silicon, if we don't lead in 5G, if we don't lead especially in AI, which I think is as important as the internet, we're going to have a problem in the future on our competitiveness. And the same problem exists for Europe. There goes back to the point that Carl raised. We probably need to get those two countries, our two regions working closer together. If you look at some of our own defense data out of the 20 major areas of technology that are important to our future defense as a country, China leads in 15 of the 20. So I think we need to lead in AI. I think we need to lead in 5G. But where you're leading me is to my earlier comment. I think startups are the engine for us to compete in a different way. And I'm encouraging my startups not actually do business in China. And I understand the size of that market. And I understand I was the champion for China back in the mid-90s in terms of our countries working closer together. But this is where I think a firm hand has to take place. And our country ought to think about how do we generate leadership and how do we protect the current leadership in terms of technology in areas that are so important to ASICs, et cetera. How important is Intel? Extremely important. NVIDIA, et cetera, to our future.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.